Am I allowed to open my sherbet during this podcast?
Why am I a criminal for wanting halloumi wraps?
He's just shook his head and yes. So if anyone gets annoyed at me eating sherbet during this, I apologise.
I discovered a pretty cool thing because we record on 2 mono tracks now. So when there's weird noises while the other person's speaking, you can generate silence on the other side. So all those N-bombs you were dropping last episode, I just cut them all out.
What N-bombs?
Do you not remember all the racial slurs you were using as I was talking? You just kept shouting them.
Whatever.
Started.
You div.
Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to A Drunk History of Middle-earth, a podcast where, on the surface, it's about Lord of the Rings. In fact, we use it to discuss very important topics like what we should have done with the ingredients we bought in the shopping for the meals.
We use this time to communicate, our weekly communication time.
That's true. It's our weekly communication. So if you listen to this episode, it's about the Vanyar Elves, which are the Goodest boys and Goodest girls of the Valar. Our last episode was all about the Morroquendi, who are the Dark Elves, the elves who didn't see the light of a man. So if you want to go back and listen to that episode, absolutely do. Now, before we get started today, I'm going to do this at the top of the episode. Please like, review, subscribe, share, tell your nana, make your dad get a tramp stamp tattoo. However you can help us get word around would be absolutely fantastic. I'm only one man who takes care of our social media, and I can't do it all. And I genuinely love the interactions that we have with people. And I will give a shout out to Chris Hitchcock, who's a musician from North Carolina, who described us as having amazing accents, to which I was like, what the fuck are you on about? And he said, in North Carolina, we sound like cultured royalty, which...
That's nice.
Yeah, it is nice, but
I'm
it's
going to go and have high tea now.
I can't imagine... I can't imagine a North Carolina accent. Do you know what I'm coming up with? Is, like, have you seen Wrong Turn?
Yes.
I'm just thinking, like, you shouldn't have done that. Oh, no. What is it?
That sounds quite sexy.
No, I'm thinking... Do you know, I'm thinking of Wrong Turn, where they do the southern accents, but the quote I've just done was fucking Cartman from South Park, where he finds... I think he finds one of the mum's tampons in the trash, and he thinks it's the thrown away baby. And he just keeps the whole episode, he goes, you shouldn't have done that. He's just a boy. I don't know if that's what North Carolina sounds like. Anyway, that was very nice of Chris to say we have amazing accents. I don't agree, but I will take the compliment.
I do agree. I'm going to take the compliment and I'm going to say, yes, we have the best accents because we're from the northeast. I'm going to try and have a bit of patriotism in our very crappy country right now. Not the crappiest country. We're still up there. But
that depends who you talk to.
Going down the shitter, really, isn't it?
Everything's going down the shitter. We're just watching the world burn.
The fall of Rome.
Yeah, it is. It is. Essentially, it feels like the world is the fall of Rome, and we're playing the fiddle while Rome burns.
Yeah, pretty much. We're just like, let's make the best out of this scenario.
I will say there must be a reason that at this point in my life, I've dived deep into a fucking fantasy world. When the world around me is going to shit. But that being said, I love my life.
And let's talk about elves.
Let's talk about the most perfectest of elves. So let's do a quick recap. How many groups of elves can you remember from the last episode?
There were 3. There were the ones that travelled to Iluvatar.
No, Iluvatar's God.
They travelled to Ainur.
No, those are the order of being. Aman.
They travelled to Aman.
Yes.
And they got there. Had a lovely time.
That's one group.
There was some that travelled there and then, due to unforeseen circumstances, returned back.
Yes.
There were some that didn't even bother going. Just were like, I'm happy here, peace out.
Bingo. That is one of the 3 that is 3 of the distinctions we made last time. And you are right, when we dealt with two of those groups, which
Don't
was...
ask me the names.
No, that's fine. We dealt with two of those groups, which was the ones that turned back and the ones that refused.
Which was?
The Nando means the ones who go back, and the Avari means the unwilling. Why are you testing me? I did the research and the episode. I know this.
No, you said which was. It was poor grammar, okay. I thought it was funny.
Oh, right. Oh,
I thought it was funny.
Is it which were?
Yeah?
Oh, okay.
See that sentence in your head?
I can't remember which sentence. We're going to have to move on. Today, we're going to discuss... So, of the three groups of elves who got to Aman, who became the Calaquendi, Elves of the Light, and I think the distinction is Amanyar, which means Elves of Aman. I can't think. I don't think... maybe they are Amanyar. I can't find the reference to it. Definitely Calaquendi. Elves of the Light. They saw the light of the two trees. It enriched them. It made them great. It made them class, right?
Yeah.
And of those Calaquendi that got there was all of the Vanyar, all of the Noldor, and some of the Teleri. And the Vanyar are who we're going to talk about today. So, who were the Vanyar? They were described as the fairest of the three kindreds, and their physical characteristics are that they're generally tall, with pale skin and golden hair. And the Valar, it turns out, play favourites, because they are the most revered of all the elves, and Manwë and Varda love them better than any of the others. And it's said that few among men, mortals, have ever spoken with them. And I will come to my own conclusions. I will tell you my conclusion at the end of the episode. But I like the Vanyar elves much more than I ever thought I could like any group of elves. Because you know me, I'm a hardcore dwarf man, right?
Yeah.
Through and through, dwarves all the way. But if I could choose any of the elf group to be, I'd be the Vanyar, because they are no bullshit, do what is best for us kind of thing, and not in a shitty way, but we'll come to that. And in the beginning, at Cuivainen, there was only 14 of these elves that would later become the Vanyar, and Imin was the first. He was the first elf to awake, and his name means one or first, and his wife was Iminye, according to the children's story that we covered of how elves, learn to count. I was quite surprised to learn this, because I never think of Manwë being connected to this. But Manwë gave them the gift of poetry and song, because apparently that is completely his domain and his jam, as well as being the king of the Valar, Lord of the Winds, Eru's favourite son. He's the big cheese for poetry and songs. Just like Aule is the poet, like the big one for crafting and all things to come from crafting.
Well, that's how things get passed down, aren't they? Through communication. Like, what's it called? Not what's it called again? I'm trying to think. What's like verbal tradition?
Oral history.
Yeah.
Yeah, like oral. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
History's passed down orally through societies that can't write and things like that. So
and it's very language and song is very important to the elves, because when they first woke up, that's one of the first things they did, was they started naming things, and then they started singing their own songs and what have you. And when Finrod Felagund comes into the story later on, who is a Noldor elf, he's the one who first discovers men in Beleriand. And he waits till they're asleep, and he goes into their camp, and he picks up a harp, and he starts to sing a song. And the men who wake up, it's so beautiful, the song that he's singing, that the men who wake up think that they're kind of like in a dream. And Finrod teaches them stuff, and teaches them the language of the elves and that. And so, yeah, songs and poetry and that are massive for the elves.
I felt like it was going down a rapey kind of direction.
No.
He teaches them things.
Mr. Felagund has released a statement on this matter, and he is receiving inpatient treatment for the foreseeable future, and he will no longer be hosting the 10 o'clock BBC News. But elves poetry, very important, because it was important to Tolkien. Now, anyone who follows us on Instagram, which you absolutely should, will see that I am regularly posting snippets of poetry from the Lays of Beleriand, where I'm reading the Lay of Leithian, which tells the story of Beren and Luthien, and it's one of the longest versions of that poem that there is, because I love that rhyming couplets bit, and yeah, elves have got tons of songs. So Tolkien, elves did like the poetry and songs because it was important to Tolkien. So fair dues. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Tolkien was a philologist. So
Wow.
there are some language bits that we'll go through first, because I know you like to get it out of the way. And first name...
I didn't bring my pen and paper.
Yeah. The first name we have is Vanyar, which is obviously it's the title of this episode. And the Vanyar... the word Vanyar in Quenya simply means the fair. They're called that because of their hair. It's just like how you refer to everyone with dark hair as browns and blacks.
Oh, Chris. No, I do not.
You don't, I'm joking. Oh, your face there, that was class. The Vanyar, though, name themselves the Minyar, which just means the firsts. Another name they also give themselves is Ingar or Ingwe, which means chieftains. So they're not shy about being proud of who they are. And in Sindarin, which is the other elven language, and it's the most popular one in the Third Age, calls them Miniel or Miniel, which means first elf or first elves. So everywhere they go, it's just... Do you remember how Saruman's names all translate to like wise man?
Yeah.
And even in Old English in the real world, Saruman means wise old man or something. It's just like that. Every variation of Vanyar is to do with how they're the first. That's their whole jam. And lastly, a couple of other names that apply to them are Calaquendi and Light Elves. And Light Elves because these boys and girls most definitely saw the light of the two trees. And so let's go over a bit of history of the Vanyar. And again, I was surprised kind of how much there is to this, and two, surprised by how much I like them. Of all the elves I've studied so far, these are my favourite. So we mentioned in our last episode that when Orome got to the elves, it started a debate amongst them. It wasn't straight away they were like, yeah, let's go. Instead, they eventually chose 3 ambassadors, and Ingwe was one of these ambassadors who went to Valinor, and he's the one who didn't want to come back and wanted to stay with Varda and Manwë. And he gets his wish pretty quickly. And I will make a small correction to the last episode. I said that Ingwe, once he goes to Valinor, when the Great Journey starts, he never comes back again.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was there in person, but it's pretty safe to assume that he might have been back to Middle-earth once before the end of the First Age, and then never again.
Was he the guy who copped off with someone?
No, but we'll come to them, because they do play into the story, the elves and men ones.
Oh, right, okay.
And no, you're thinking of Elwë, who became Thingol, who married Melian, the Maya.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is of the Teleri elves, who we'll cover in another episode. So Ingwe was one of the ambassadors. He didn't want to come back, and barring coming back from being an ambassador, then coming back once more before the end of the First Age, he does get his wish, and he stays in Valinor. He doesn't get involved in much. And during the Great Journey, the Vanyar elves were always at the front. They were always in the vanguard. They were pushing ahead constantly, like, come on, let's fucking go. So the whole time throughout the Great Journey, Orome would lead them. Okay?
Yeah.
And the elves...
Who's Orome again?
The Valar. The huntsman, the one who discovers the elves.
Okay, yeah.
So Orome, on his horse Nahar, would lead them. But the elves were in love with everything. They loved it. So they were walking under the stars all the time because the sun and the moon hadn't risen yet. and they wanted to stop everywhere, and they wanted to, but Orome was like, it was like just herding sheep, essentially, right? But every now and then, Orome would have to go, either he'd have to go and hunt some of Morgoth's monsters, or he'd have to return to Valinor, because the Great Journey took many years, remember? Occasionally he'd have to go, and the elves, whenever he would leave for a bit, the elves would stop wherever they were and just kind of wander about for a bit until he came back for them.
Yeah.
And until, obviously, the Misty Mountains is the first stopping point for those who set out. But the Vanyar didn't hesitate to cross the Misty Mountains. They just went. And as we discussed last time, the Misty Mountains caused a split with the Teleri Elves.
Yeah.
Didn't happen with any of the Vanyar or any of the Noldor. They were just
on it.
On it. Straight across. Fucking YOLO. Running up one side, running down the other. Like a Looney Tunes
like
card.
Takeshi's Castle.
Yeah, it was like Looney Tunes. They just ran up the one
No.
side, straight back down the other.
I think it's more like Takeshi's Castle.
Yeah.
Just the effort I can imagine, because obviously all the contestants on Takeshi's Castle, they all in it, run straight into it. They want to get to that end challenge. So I see it.
Well, yeah, fair dues, aye, yeah.
And all those Japanese YouTube videos we've been viewing.
Yeah, all I can think of is those elves trying to run ahead, but they don't realise that like some of the Teleri elves have attached like bungee cords to the back of their pants, and they're just getting like slammed backwards. Like, you know, at the end of Shaun of the Dead where they've got the zombies in the game show.
Oh yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, it's like Takeshi's Castle, yeah. So the Vanyar eventually came into Beleriand and then to the shores. They crossed without any hesitation in the first trip across the sea. They went first to Aman and then to Valinor, and that's it. The Vanyar straight there. But I'm going to pause here and ask you, how do you think the elves got across the sea the first time?
I think that they swam.
Yeah? Is that your final answer, given that our last episode was the Song of Nimrod? In the last episode we mentioned the Song of Nimrodel.
The boatman.
Who fucking drowned trying to swim back to shore.
Well, when I said swim, I kind of meant floated.
Yeah. How?
You know, like the Dead Sea.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it kind of just, like, floated them there.
Maybe. That might have come to that. I mean,
because they wanted them there.
The Valar did want them there, and almost the Lord of Waters.
Surely,
Deep
that's
Waters.
what I was thinking. That was my logic, that he would kind of assist them.
Well, that might have been actually a more reasonable thing to do.
Or Jesus, where, like, the seas part for him.
That was Moses.
Moses and the seas part for him.
Yeah, okay, alright, I can see this happening. I can see this.
I sound like a mad, raggy lunatic,
No,
don't
I can... right, it's not completely out there. I can understand where you're coming from. Do you remember the island Tol Eressëa? We've mentioned it a few times. It's where Bilbo, Frodo, Sam, Gimli...
It's like the middle ground.
Kind of. It's the island closest to Aman.
Yeah.
And that's the closest that they can get there, because mortals aren't allowed on Aman itself.
Yeah.
But by special...
Have the lifestyle.
By special... Yeah, because it'd kill you as well. But by special exception, they could go and live there till the end of their days, right? Well, Tol Eressëa means lonely isle in Quenya, because it used to sit in the sea by itself. And what Ulmo did was, much like me when I've got our daughter in the pram, he grabbed it and just across the sea. He pushed them across the sea on an island. So he grabbed an island out of the middle of the ocean, dragged it to Beleriand, said, "Hop on, kids." They jumped on, and then he made big brum brum noises across the whole sea.
I didn't think of that option because I'm not Ulmo.
Well, yeah, true.
So I didn't think the logistics through.
True.
But it makes sense.
It's not very often I say, well, no, actually, he just moved an entire island. But this happened twice. So Ulmo pushed it over, then back, then over. And that was twice, I think, was how he did it. just a whole island casually being ripped up, and then it came to rest, and it came to rest just off the coast of Amman, and that's where it stayed forever. And a lot of Teleri elves lived there until they moved on to a place called Alqualonde, which was a port near. It was in Amman
That
itself.
sounds like a holiday and destination.
It does,
That
yeah.
sounds like Benidorm.
Alqualonde by Tui. And what this kind of made me laugh is in earlier versions and some interpretations of Tolkien's work, Tol Eressëa, well, it's not an interpretation. Tol Eressëa was a stand-in for the UK. It's a lonely island. But given the way the world looks, right, this made me laugh because if that was the case and that was the UK, it'd be the same as finding out that God used Britain as a way to get French people to Canada, and that's all we were used for. Like, I'd be fucking raging. Could you imagine that? Fucking hell. But yeah, so the Vanyar got across, and there they are. They're in Amman now. First, they lived in a city called Tirion, which is an elvish city in Valinor. There's the city of the Valar called Valmar. The city of the Valar in Valinor called Valmar, which means city of bells. The elves built their own city called Tirion, and there Ingwe, the chief, the captain of the
I'm
Vanyar.
the captain now.
Yeah, so the Vanyar and the Noldor lived there together, and Ingwe was the ruler, the High King of Elves. And around this time, Ingwe had a large tower built called Mindon Eldalieva, I think is the pronunciation. Mindon Eldalieva. And the name means...
Like the Spanish Lieva.
And the name means our tower, or Tower of the Eldar, which to me seemed a bit mafia. It's like, do you know what Tony Soprano's like, our thing, this thing of ours.
Yeah.
They did exactly that with a tower. So it leads to the question, did Tony Soprano ever read the Silmarillion? Almost certainly not. In Tirion, Yavanna gave the elves a gift, and that gift being Yavanna. Yavanna is the kind of woman you know what you're getting from her every Christmas and birthday. It's a fucking plant, because that is her
Pair
whole
of
thing.
socks.
Nope, you get socks from Aule that he knitted himself. From Yavanna, you're getting plants every single time, and the elves were no exception. They got a tree, and a tree was called Galathilion, and it was the spit and dab of Telperion, the silver tree.
I thought it rang a bell, the name.
Yeah, except the only difference was it just didn't give out light. But knowing Yavanna, it was one of the most beautiful. So, listeners, I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence here. I'm going to assume why you know that was a silly thing for Rebecca to say. And Rebecca, I think you know why that was a silly thing to say. The tower, Mindon Eldalieva, was the highest point of the city, and there was an incident where the Noldor left the city and they left Amman altogether and came to Middle-earth. It was when Fëanor stirred up shit, and the shit started being stirred up in the city of Tirion, and that's where Fëanor made his big speech near the tree, and him and his 7 sons declared the oath of Fëanor, and then they all left. And the Fëanor and his sons never looked back when they left. They were too proud, right? But some of the elves looked back as they were leaving Amman, and the tower, the beacon shining in the darkness, was the last thing that they saw, because it was so bright and beautiful. And when the elves were leaving, following Fëanor, a dark figure appeared on the rocks near them and proclaimed the doom of Mandos, which was a prophecy about the miseries that they would suffer after leaving the protection of the Valar. And we'll go more into this in the Noldor episode because it's a big event. But one of the Noldor and a few others turned back after this, but the most important one was a Noldor elf called Finarfin, who was Galadriel's dad. And Fëanor was his half-brother, which means that Galadriel is Fëanor's niece. But Finarfin had a bit of sense, so he changed his mind and he turned back and he said, "Look, I'm very sorry." And the first thing that he saw when he came back was the tower shining in the distance, and it's a beacon, that tower. But fucking Noldor though, right? We're talking about the Vanyar. And at some point during living in the city of Tirion, the Goodest boys and Goodest girls yearned for more face time with the Valar, and so they moved out of the city and they went to live on the plains and the woods at the bottom of Taniquetil.
They went all hippie.
Yeah. They went to the bottom of Taniquetil.
Grounding and things.
Yeah, they just went to live just directly below Manwë's halls, so that they were always nearby. And as I mentioned, Ingwe is the king of all elves above all others. And so, as it stands currently, Finarfin turned back and rules as the king of the Noldor in Valinor, right?
Yeah.
I think Olwe is still the king of the Teleri, and Ingwe is the king of the Vanyar. But Ingwe also is the high king of all elves, and the only king above him is Manwë, who is king of all Arda.
I'm going to be honest here. Do you really remember all these names? Because I'm going cross-eyed here.
Given the amount of research I do for each episode, and the amount I talk about it, and the amount I think about it, and just how deeply fascinating it is to me, there is a chance. There's always a chance that I'll mix up a name, but it's normally one of the Finns. I'll mix up Fingon with Finarfin, or
nerd.
It's just something like that, or like Thingol with Finrod, and in my head. But I'm getting better. Like the thing is, like, I don't think there's any skill ceiling to this. Like, you just keep going. In terms of, I'm not going to say scholarly pursuit because that's so fucking pretentious, but in terms of nerdiness, you just keep going. Just keep going.
So if anyone wants any motivation to dig in deep into Tolkien.
Hey, if you want to neglect your job in favour of an autistic pursuit of Lord of the Rings, you can do it. I believe in you. I've done it.
No, you haven't. I know how early you get up to work.
I love my job, so let's not. Anyway, Ingwe is the High King of all elves. Manwë is the High King of just everybody. Men die too quickly, nobody gives a fuck. But things was happening in Valinor, right, in the first age. And our episode of the Chaining of Melkor, I think, at the end of that, Morgoth got sent to do porridge, got sent to do hard time, do you remember, for 3 ages of the world?
Yeah.
When he came out, he was on tag, and he had to live within the city of Valmar for a bit. And there was elves coming and going, right? And there was elves all around. But then after a little bit, he was allowed out of Valmar, and he was allowed to roam around the continent and do what he will, because he pretended that everything was fine.
Yeah.
This is one of my best parts about it. So Morgoth, this whole time, deeply hated everyone and everything, and he wanted to manipulate people to his own ends. The Teleri he thought were too weak. The Vanyar were strong, very strong, but none of the Vanyar trusted him. None of them. They would not give him the fucking time of day. They were like, "You are the drama, sir. Fuck off." None of them would give him the time of day. So he couldn't get his hooks in. Couldn't manipulate them. Couldn't do anything. The Noldor, on the other hand, so this is before Feanor kicks off, right?
Yeah.
The Noldor, on the other hand, they wanted to learn. They were tryhards, as we mentioned. Like, they wanted to be the best at everything. And Feanor around this time had created the Silmarils, which Morgoth desired above all else. And so through things like that, he was able to sow mistrust and stuff between the elves, to the point where Feanor drew a sword on his half brother and got banished from the city of Tirion for like 12 years or something. So the point being, Morgoth could manipulate the Noldor, couldn't get a foot in with the Vanyar, couldn't do it, couldn't get close to them. And that's what I like about the Vanyar, is that they're just no bullshit. They were like, Nietzsche. They're the ones who, like, if a drunk ex called them, offering a booty call, they're like, you've had too much to drink, we split up for a reason, I'm not doing this. Whereas the Noldor, like, one night couldn't hurt.
10 kids later.
Aye. As I mentioned, you are a one night stand that's just got out of hand. I'll be honest. I don't know how to tell you.
You are so fucking rude.
I'm joking. Heather said that about Jono the other day, actually, which I thought was hilarious. So yeah, it's I think every
hilarious because it's true.
No, I think it's not true. Behave. I think every couple makes that joke though at some point, like, oh, I just don't know how to tell you to go home.
Well, I've never made that joke to you.
I'm pretty sure you have.
No, I have not.
I'm pretty sure you have.
You're just rude.
I am not. But well, let's go back to the elves. Let's go back to the elves and we'll argue this out once we're done. I'm joking. We're going to go to bed.
Yeah, we are.
As I mentioned in the last episode, it's not an apartheid. Elves mix with each other, and naturally there are some mixing between the clans. So Feanor's dad, Finwë, was one of the ambassadors, and he is a bit of an edge case with elves because elves generally marry once and for life completely, to the point, like, it's built into elves that they, except two of Feanor's sons who were bastards, Celegorm and Curufin, but elves know if someone else is married, and they don't ever desire to cheat or anything like that. Like, it's just built into their monogamy for life, right? But Finwë's wife died after giving birth to Feanor. She gave so much of herself that she died, and and what was interesting is she refused to be reincarnated in the halls of Mandos. She just refused. She said, I'm not coming back. And so Finwë was left heartbroken without a wife, and I think it was Manwë himself, because Finwë wanted to remarry, which had never been done before in elves, and as far as I'm aware, it's the only time it's ever been done, as an elf remarries. And Finwë remarried a Vanyar elf called Indis, and one of her sons she had with Finwë was Finarfin, who we just mentioned is the dad of Galadriel, and that's why Galadriel, despite being a Noldor elf, has Vanyar blood in her, which is why she has golden hair. Because most Noldor, if you I don't know if you remember this, but from the Awakening at Cuiveanin, I mentioned, I think, that the Noldor elves mainly all have dark hair, and that's what they're known for, is their dark features. But Galadriel, golden haired, and it's because of the Vanyar blood in her.
So is there a term for mixed elves?
No, it just goes by which
group they join, like their faithfulness.
Yeah, I think it's. I think it's mainly. I think it's primogeniture mainly. It's like, who's your dad? Like, who does your dad belong, kind of thing. Ooh. But then there's other times where
who's on the birth certificate? Yeah. What's your second name?
Yeah, but then there's other times where they talk about, like, the degree of blood that they've got in them, which we'll come to in a second. But if we switch back to when Feanor and his sons and their followers left Valinor, a couple of Teleri and some Noldor and that went with them, but there's only one known Vanyar elf who left with them, and she was called Elenwe, and Elenwe was the wife of another Noldor elf called Turgon, who becomes the king of the hidden city of Gondolin, which you might have heard mentioned a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And this bit's heartbreaking, right? She's the only Vanyar elf that we know of to have left Valinor. And when they were crossing an ice bridge between continents called the Helcaraxi, Elenwe and her daughter Idril fell into the waters, and in icy waters, it's a death sentence, just like, jumping off a cruise ship. It's pretty much a death sentence. Turgon tried to save them both, but he was only able to save his daughter, and his wife died. So despite her leaving because of the love for her husband, I'd imagine she didn't even make it to Middle Earth, which is just. But like just. Oh, that could be
Tragic.
the worst thing that must ever happen to a father and a husband is the two people you love most in the world in danger, and you can't save them both. That's just.
You wouldn't save me. You would save Autumn.
I try and save you both.
No, you wouldn't.
I
You
would.
would save Autumn.
I would try and save you both. I would. But
Well, we had this conversation before Autumn was born.
yeah, we did.
Before we know her as a person and stuff, you don't
Yeah.
have a relationship with them like you do in terms of they're in the bump. But like I said, if it comes to deciding who survives, you've got to choose me.
Yeah, no.
But like I suppose once even like after a couple of days, you're in love with them.
Absolutely.
Even after a couple of seconds of them popping out, you're in love with them. So
And this has been hundreds and maybe even a couple of thousand of what we'd term our years.
yeah,
So
and
this
it's part of him.
this is pretty fucked up. But like it regardless of your semantics of what you said there, you'd want to save both of them, and it would haunt you for the rest of your life if you couldn't. If you could only save one of them, you'd always want them both to live. It's not.
Especially if the daughter turned into a proper twat.
It's not about that. Like you'd never stop loving them. But yeah, it's just horrible. But so Idril and Turgon survive, and Idril eventually marries Tuor, making her and Tuor the second of only 3 human and elf pairings in all of history. The first being Beren and Luthien, and the third being Arwen and Aragorn. Idril and Tuor go on to have a child called Erendil, who is woven throughout the Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings, and he kills the biggest dragon ever and breaks a mountain. But enough said, because again, we're now reaching the point in these episodes where there is a whole tapestry of stories, and you'll hear names come up again and again, and they're just kind of in the background. And this is one of them. Erendil, the mariner, is his own story. Idril and Tuor, their own story. Turgon, massive story by itself.
Yeah.
So, and for any, I say any listeners, for the listeners, again and again, we're now at the point where it's a tapestry of stories now. And so you'll hear events and you'll think, oh, that sounds familiar. And it's because I've briefly described it in another episode. But now we're going to go into more detail. Like I said, the Oath of Feanor just now. We're going to come way back to that, because it's a massive thing. The Doom of Mandos, massive part of it, but it's not a massive part of this story that we're telling about the Vanyar.
Okay, I gotcha.
So basically, fucking tapestry of names at the moment. And the last, and so that's Elenwe is the only Vanyar to leave Valinor, dies at the Helcaraxi, and they're only crossing the Helcaraxi because Feanor fucked over the other Noldor. He stole some ships after killing some Teleri elves and left most of the other Noldor and said, fuck yous. And so, arguably, those are the worst off ones because they can't go back to Valinor now because they've put themselves in exile. So they now got to push on over the very, very dangerous Helcaraxi ice.
Yeah.
And so Feanor, massive cunt, essentially. But let's go back and we're back to the Vanyar. Let's go back and discuss the last bit of the Vanyar's history and the one time that they did come back to Middle-earth. And it was at the end of the first age of Middle-earth. Things weren't going well for people. Morgoth was winning. Things were very bad. And the people who had their heads screwed on in Middle-earth at the time knew that Morgoth was not going to be overthrown without help from the Valar. So this is many, many years past the crossing of the Helcaraxi. This is hundreds of years later now, right? Or what we term as hundreds of years. But the Valar had a non-interference policy with Middle-earth, considering the last time they intervened,
they world.
They wrecked it. And remember that we know from one of the much earlier episodes that any time the Valar have tried to force elves or men to do something against their will, it never turns to good. Never. So they've got the Noldor elves. They couldn't really stop them from going, but and the Doom of Mandos was the prophecy that You're going to bring utmost ruin on yourselves. It's going to be fucking horrible. And all that has come to pass now. It's a very, very dark time in Middle-earth. And it was Erendil, who we've just mentioned, funnily enough, he pops back up again, who is the half-elf son of Tuor and Idril. Because Tuor is the only man to ever be made into an immortal elf and live in a man. And him and Idril have gone now. They've passed out of the story. They're in Valinor together. They've sailed west. Erendil, their son, is growing up. He's a famous mariner. He manages to sail to a man with the help of a Silmaril. That's how he's able to get across the water without being shipwrecked or anything. And this is a man, remember. Erendil is half-elf, so he's counted among men.
Yeah.
And he makes it to Valinor.
Without having to jump on an island.
Without having to jump on an island, he just uses a ship called the Vingalote, or Vingalot, I think.
Was he the first person to make ships?
No, but he's the first mortal to ever set foot on a man, and the Valar Mandos really does not like this. But Erendil gets to Valinor, and he goes to the Valar, and he says, I've come on the errand of the two kindreds. I come on behalf of elves and men. Morgoth will not be overthrown without your help. And he begged the Valar for help, and that so that they could please do something. And Mandos wanted him to die for being a mortal who stepped foot on the on a man, but Manwë in his wisdom said, "Allow it, bruv." He comes on the errand of two kindreds, and so what happens is Erendil is not killed. He's made immortal, but he's never allowed to set foot on Middle-earth again. Neither is his wife, Elwing. I think she's called Elwing.
That's nice of them.
And they get to live together forever. And Erendil, they hallow his boat.
Ever.
They hallow his boat, the Vingalot, and they raise it up into the sky. And he has to sail it through the night, and it's a star. And that's what the star is, because he has the Silmaril on his brow.
Yeah.
And that's one Silmaril removed from the world, because every night he goes across the sky, and his wife Elwing, she can turn herself into a bird, and she meets him every day, and they rest together before every night he flies out again. But the important thing is Erendil was successful in his mission. Also, by the way, that's Elrond's dad. That's who that is. Erendil left two kids behind. Elrond Hubbard. He leaves behind Elrond and Elros. Again, tapestry, but whole of the story. The end result is this. Erendil is successful in his mission. The hosts of Valinor come forth, and they take many, many ships and sail from the west back to Middle-earth. And it's an army of elves and Maiar, including the Vanyar and the Noldor. The Teleri elves, you notice, are not there in the army. They are mariners. They will sail the ships. But because the first ever kinslaying, which is elves killing elves, was the Noldor killing the Teleri and stealing their ships, they will not participate in the war. They will not fight on behalf of the Noldor.
Yeah.
But instead, so they said, the most we'll do is we'll send the ships. We'll sail you there, and we'll sail you back, but we're not fighting, not for those cunts.
Yeah.
Which, fair dues, like, fucking fair dues. And so, the Vanyar, who left Middle-earth and wanted nothing more to do with it, they came for the last time, and they wrecked Morgoth for a long time, and it's said that they favoured spears as their weapon, and their banners were gleaming white, so they must have posed a very intimidating figure on the battlefield. These golden-headed warriors with long spears and white banners, just like they look like the ultimate fucking good guys, right?
Yeah.
They just look like good. And so the Balrogs were defeated or driven away to hide under the depths of the world, i.e. the one that hid itself in the mines of Moria. And in a last desperate attempt, this is called the War of Wrath, by the way. This is the war that wrecks Beleriand, so that it's no longer there. In a last desperate attempt, Morgoth unleashes the dragons on the battlefield. Up until now, there's only been one in and around the Silmarillion, which is Glaurung, but now he releases all of them. And this almost causes the hosts of Valinor to lose the war. The dragons cause terror, utter destruction, wrecking the world. The mountains are crushed, the seas are rushing in, things are going underwater. And the day is only saved by, fucking lo and behold, Eärendil in his flying ship. He leads Thorondor and the giant eagles into battle against the dragons. And that's, by my count, that's 3 times now that eagles have come in and saved giant battles from going wrong. Catastrophe, as we've mentioned previously. And Eärendil kills Ancalagon the Black, and his death crushes the mountains Thangorodrim. And with that, they're able to turn the tide. The hosts of Valinor retake the lost ground. They destroy Morgoth's strongholds and descend into Angband to find that little bitch hiding. And the end result here is that Morgoth is overthrown and thrust through the doors of night outside Arda forever. He's in the void forever. And that is where he will remain until the Dagor Dagorath.
Yeah.
Which is the end battle. It's Ragnarok. And that is the War of Wrath. And Eonwe, who is the greatest and strongest Maiar of all, asked all the elves in Beleriand to leave with him and go to a man. And I imagine he did this with a very exasperated, for fuck's sake, look at everything that has happened. Will you please just get on the fucking ships? For God's sake. For Eru's sake. And most of the elves do, except the ones we discussed. So you've got a couple of outliers like Orifer, who's Legolas's granddad, and a few of the Sylvan elves who, from Doriath, like Thingol's people and stuff like that. The ones who go, so a few of them go east and they go into Mirkwood, Lothlorien. That's where they start making their homes. Galadriel, Gil-galad, Círdan the Shipwright, they go east instead of west because, as I mentioned last time, it's still that pride thing. These elves, so like Gil-galad, sets up an elven kingdom. They still want these places to,
especially when they've just
rule.
fought for it.
Yeah, it's like they don't want to go back and serve the Valar. They want to have their own places to rule.
Be free people.
Yeah, so they have free, and that's what they don't get. But Celeborn and Galadriel, they go to Lothlorien, become the Lord and Lady of the Woods. Orifer goes to Greenwood, which becomes Mirkwood. And his son Thranduil eventually becomes king, etc., etc. There's Celebrimbor, who will forge the Rings of Power. So all of these people, they go and set up their own kingdoms instead of taking advice from the best Maiar of all, which is Eonwe. But you can bet your fucking ass, not a single Vanyar stayed. They were do you know in Family Guy where one of them will say oh, do you want to go for a ride and before they finish Brian's in the car?
Yeah. And
he's like, come on. That's exactly what the Vanyar would be like. As soon as Eonwe started speaking, the Vanyar would be on the ship and they'd be like, yeah, come on, can we go? Come on. Come on, hurry up. So none of the Vanyar stayed. They just went straight away. Some of the Noldor, some of the Teleri were not as wise, but a lot of them were. And a lot of them did go west. And that's the Vanyar. That is the Vanyar. And perhaps they are my favourite group of elves because I've clowned on them being like swats and the goodest of elves and that. But
no shit.
They are the most sensible. That's what I love about them. No Middle-earth bullshit. No Morgoth foolishness. No Feanorian pride. Just straight up, I love Varda, I love Manwë. I don't even want to stay in the same city in heaven where this wanker is walking around. We're going to go move out to the woods. Just fucking leave us alone. We love our life. Do not mess with that. Don't fuck with it. Please leave us alone. Leave us out of your bullshit. And I could totally fucking...
You're convincing me.
I can respect that. That's exactly how we live our life though, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is exactly how we live. Like, if someone starts being a dickhead, like, we don't try and solve it. We don't try and fix
see you
anyone.
later.
Yeah, we're like, all right, fuck you. And I've said that me and my friends, like, Riley, so much is, we'll say happiness, like, what you've been up to. I won't see him for months, and I'll be like, what you've been up to? He's like, you know, the same. Have a little quick update because happiness is boring.
Yeah.
And Chris Rock, I think, put it in one of the best ways. He said, like, the only exciting relationships are bad ones. And he's like, you never know what's going to happen in a bad relationship. Like, with a good relationship, you're like, oh, how things go, and you know, and you haven't, that you know, you're existing, you're happy, and you're living your life together.
And you start like having disagreements about who cooks tea more.
Yeah, if those are our problems, they're pretty fucking alright problems to be having. You know, there's obviously my crippling gambling addiction and you seeing male gigolos, but that's fine, we'll work on it. But Chris Rock says in his joke, he's like, the only exciting relationships are bad ones. He says, you're never going to know what's happening in a bad relationship. He says, like, one day you're going to walk through the door and be like, you gave me crabs. But no, that's the Vanyar. And they're not drama queens. The Noldor, who we'll cover, I think, is the next elves we cover. It might not be the next episode, but as the next elves we cover will probably be the Noldor. And they're a proper fucking doozy because they are drama queens. But that's it, my love. That's the Vanyar. What do you think of what do you think of them?
Yeah, I like them. You've got me convinced. Yeah.
I came at this with a very much like, you fucking swats, you absolute nerds. And then I started reading it, and I read more into it, and I was researching them, and I thought, you know what? Nah, they're the adults.
Yeah.
They're the mature elves of like, leave us out of your shit.
They're just content.
Absolutely. So I think, you know, everyone.
Simplicity is bliss.
Yeah, everyone wants to be Legolas, riding down the stairs, or shooting a bow on a shield. I want to be the elf who's not even in the fucking films. I want to be unnamed elf.
In a hammock.
I want to be unnamed elf 563 in a hammock in the woods at the bottom of Tanaquetil.
Reading your book.
Exactly. Reading some elf poetry. That's who the fuck I want to be.
Sounds
I don't want to be at Helm's Deep.
I want to be sitting having a nice cup of tea with my supper.
Yeah, like, yeah.
My 11sies.
I want the most interesting thing I do as an elf to hear that there's a hobbit that has come and lived on and is living on Tol Eressëa, and I'd be like, first about what the fuck is a hobbit?
Then you'd be like, can you please set up a shop to sell breakfast, and then second breakfast?
Yeah, but yeah.
And then third breakfast.
So, not to judge anyone who idolizes the various characters, but at this point, I think unless you're a dwarf who is literally just a blacksmith or a Vanyar elf, I think you're a bit of an attention-seeking drama queen, to be honest. So, right, let's go through.
Let's do a poll.
Let's go through the actual roles that I'd want to have in Lord of the Rings, right? Vanyar on the slopes of Tanaquetil.
Yeah.
One of the hobbits who doesn't leave the Shire.
Yes.
One of the dwarves who doesn't leave the Blue Mountains or Erebor during the course of it. Actually, none of the men really escape, actually. They're all kind of involved in wars.
Yeah, men are fucked.
That's big ones, that. Where would be the most peaceful place to be a man during... Oh, I suppose, not even Dale. Dale has a war during the War of the Ring, because that's where Dain Ironfoot and King Brand of Dale, they both die fighting to defend Erebor. I'd be one of the Easterlings who didn't go to war. I didn't march to Middle-earth. That's where I'd be as a man. Like a human during Lord of the Rings. Anyone else, I'm going to say, if you want to be any of the ones who fought or were involved in the story, you're an attention-seeking drama queen.
I just want to be a tree.
Yeah, fair dues.
Just a nice tree.
Mm.
I want to be that tree that Thingy gifted. What's her name?
Oh, Yavanna.
I want to be that tree. As long as they look after me.
Yeah, fair dues. Absolutely. Right. In lieu of a Tolkien fun fact this week. We're going to do...
Smut of the week.
Right, I'm just going to go cold into this one. Gimli laid under the blankets, his eyes closed as if he were asleep. Legolas didn't realise he only had his eyes closed, and he began to sing softly as he dried his hair. It was a song in Elvish that Gimli had never heard before. Legolas had a beautiful voice, with perfect pitch. The elf folded the towel back up and went into his pack for his nightshirt. "Hold on there," Gimli said, opening his eyes. "You're awake!" Legolas jumped. "Waiting for you. Come here, just like that," Gimli said. Legolas chuckled and put his nightshirt back, and he walked to the bed, climbing inside beside Gimli. He crawled over to him, getting on top and laying between his legs. Gimli put his hands on his hips as he smiled knowingly at him. Legolas blinked his sleepy eyes that sparkled with happiness, and they both moved in until their lips met.
Oh, how sexy.
Oh,
Especially
goodness me.
That Scottish accent. Ooh.
Do you know what the worst thing was? I had to skip through about 3 pages, and a good page and a half was the descriptions of them braiding each other's hair. Which, fair dues, like I said, Lord of the Rings smut, the prose is immaculate.
Yeah.
I cannot fault them for that. So it is, from a technical standpoint, it's beautiful to read. But fucking hell.
When you wanting to get to the nitty gritty, you're just wanting a quick one and out the house. You're gonna be spending your time reading about the many braids.
Right, I'm gonna have to pull this episode to a close. That was the Vanyar. The goodest, the most. Do you know what this was for me? This was the San Francisco of the elves. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was, but it turns out it might be my favourite piece of the whole thing. So yeah, right. I'm gonna pull this to a close. It's been a bit nonsense at the end, so I'm gonna say good night from me.
And good night from Rebecca. Peace.